Welcome to the Somniel. I'm not boring you with every orange I pick up, but I will check in a few times over the course of the campaign. The Somniel, as the name suggests, is a sleepy safe haven, a hub where you can manage your team, play minigames, and play maps outside of the main timeline. I enjoy having a comfy counterbalance to the main gameplay loop, which is exciting but often stressful and cognitively demanding. I think I got a gray hair playing through Chapter 5. I'm also pretty impatient, unfortunately, and so I quickly lost the motivation to maximize the Somniel. Orchard picking, strength training every map, trials, etc. I've settled on a Somniel routine that focuses on what's most relevant to in-chapter gameplay, closer to base preps in older Fire Emblem titles and Garreg Monastery and Three Houses. Think of it like cooking. Some people like making everything from scratch, and some people use store-bought alternatives whenever they can. There's no right or wrong approach, and however you feel about it, I think you can learn a lot about the Somniel if you keep watching. I certainly learned a few things prepping for this video, and I've played a lot of Engage. First things first, get support and bond rank conversations. I've already done this, but you'll see these highlighted if they're available. You can't start working on the next rank until you view these. There are situations you could want to skip a support or bond conversation, but the only one I would normally hesitate on is level 10 bond rank with Leaf. I'll discuss that more when we get Leaf. Do this first thing, because many Somniel activities give support points. After that, we'll head inside to the bulletin board. I have a quality of life mod that adds the Ancient Well here, but normally it's just donations and achievements. Donations primarily increase rewards from after battle exploration. They also give you a one-time care package, let you adopt different animals in the Somniel, and increase the likelihood of rare skirmishes that give more rewards. Level 2 donations multiply the ore rewards, which is amazing. Get them as early as possible so you maximize their effect. Beyond that, it's hard to give firm recommendations. The costs go up exponentially, so I can't say that even the irreplaceable weapon a level 5 donation gives you is ever sound fiscal spending, but it might be fun nonetheless. I'll link a page that shows every reward so you can see if anything catches your eye. My advice, if you're indecisive, is to make Brodia the only region you donate twice to. Brodia only has a few maps, but as a mining hub it has the best ore rewards. Other regions double ore rewards with level 2 and stay at double for level 3. Brodia triples ore at level 2 and quintuples it at level 3, and as such I think for pure combat performance it's the best choice. Achievements are a significant bond fragment source. You can grind many of these if you really need to, but I'd keep that as a break glass option if you're just short of something you really need. You do not need to read a single one of these to expertly enjoy Engage. Just collect the ones you get. In the ring chamber, you do stuff with rings. Crazy, I know. You can pull and meld bond rings here. This is riggable. I'll link to a video explaining how to do it. Without DLC, getting a few cool S-rank bond rings can be fun, but this is not a mobile game. You can completely ignore this system. Everyone should get a ring to build SP, but pulling 10 or 20 from Sigurd's pool normally suffices for my runs. The Heroes free DLC guarantees 3 great rings, which really helps. Polishing rings gives a small bond rank boost. This matters before we can use bond fragments to buy them, but after that it's not a good use of your time. I find it unnerving, and never use it from now on. Using special crystals, you can augment Engage weapons to make them better. The only source of these crystals is trials, battles that exist outside the main continuity. Especially before you clear the game, getting them takes forever. Hours playing Fire Emblem, but still many hours. Luckily, the devs realized how stingy it was, and in an update give you 20 of each crystal for free. 20 crystals is enough to augment 2 level 5 weapons or 1 level 10. You gain an augmentation slot by getting a unit to bond rank 10 with an emblem. I ignored this system completely until that bonus came out, and even now I'm stuck in a hoarding mindset with these crystals. In my planning runs, I never spent a single one, out of fear that I might really need them later. That never happened, and I just let them rot in storage. That's not a wise course of action. This run, I'll conquer my demons. With you as my accountability partners, I promise to spend them all eventually. I'll start right now. Seraphim is a good target for a might boost. There are a lot of corrupted in the game, often in difficult maps, and the plus 4 damage becomes plus 12 per hit at convenient 1-2 range against them. I've certainly played through many campaigns with that augmenting, but it's not the worst idea. If you're just using the initial 20, put them on whatever weapons you use frequently. If you plan to get more, I'd save up for the level 15 weapons. Some of them are absolutely nuts, and by that point in the game, you might use them in a single turn more than will use Marth's Rapier throughout the game. Tempest Trials are fun. They refund whatever consumables you use to beat them, so you can go crazy using staves like Warp. It's totally reasonable to play a few of those, get 5 of a couple crystals, and then spend all of them on a single insane engage weapon. The ring chamber is not part of my standard routine, but you will want to come in here occasionally. When the game first came out, you had to go here often just for skill inheritance. That has thankfully been fixed, and now we can inherit skills at the arena. Let's go there. I'll talk about cooking later. You may want to wait to do it. I don't really understand how the Somniel has an ethereal pocket dimension, but I'm glad it does. Standard arena training gives 3 doses of 10 XP per map clear. This gives you some leeway for hitting class-changing benchmarks. Seals reset partial XP, unlike in Fates. Promoting a unit at level 10 with 90 XP wastes that 90 XP, so even if a unit's already eligible, you can top them off before reclassing them. If you equip bond rings on characters, not an emblem ring because they can be opponents and are unequipped before arena battles, they'll also gain 5 SP per fight. That's similarly good to know if you just miss a benchmark and don't want to spend a whole book. I normally don't bother, but it does add up if you do it consistently. In this run, I have very tight experience goals, and I need the arena to make them happen. For your own sanity, I'd advise against planning that precisely. XP has a lot of randomness. Killing blows miss, weakening blows crit and kill, Micaiah targets, dodge attacks and stay at full HP, etc. The arena can paper over all of that frustrating RNG if you build in that margin. If no one needs to hit a level threshold, there are different ways to allocate the experience. There's 3 factors I'd consider. First, if anyone needs to hit some tight experience threshold in a future map, they're the top priority. Second, many promoted units desperately want their level 5 class skills. Third, if an important combatant is almost at the next level, seeing what stats they get can help you plan. If you don't have a better idea, just feed a Leer. They have supports with everyone, which fighting in the arena boosts, and you know for sure they'll be deployed every map. The standard arena is skippable, but the emblem arena and skill inheritance are critical to most playthroughs. The primary use of bond fragments is to spend them here, building bond ranks so you can get important skills and powerful engage weapons quickly. The cost of doing this scales harshly with the bond level. Going from 1 to 5 is cheap, but going from 15 to 20 costs a fortune. If you have a unit that just missed getting to their next bond conversation, using the arena to top that off and uncap their bond rank is generally worth it. And if you're trying to get the higher bond levels quickly, buying the first 5 often makes sense. I think it's good practice to scroll through your characters and make sure people aren't just below a cap before you start a battle. Bond fragments can be scarce without the DLC bonuses, especially in the early game. If you want everyone to be using Mercurius and inheriting Cantor plus a few choice skills on top of that, you have to pay attention to achievements and Sommie and other sources of them. I'm playing with the DLC, and I very much do not enjoy the minutiae of optimizing fragment collection, so I am not the person to help you do that. Zoran's early game Engage videos are a good place to look. Unless you don't have the DLC and want to do elaborate Mercurius XP strats, take a deep breath. Relax, you'll be fine. As the game progresses, you get tons of bond fragments, and emblems become more important for actually clearing maps and not just funneling XP. Most Engage games specialize. Each emblem mainly pairs up with one person, with perhaps a secondary or tertiary unit on occasion. You will have more than enough bond fragments to do any kind of skill inheritance or emblem training you need if you're playing normally. Spending fragments on accelerating bond rank with your chosen pairings means you spend more time playing with the awesome high-end emblem synergies. Do budget in whatever skills you plan to inherit, but beyond that, feel free to spend them on short-term gains. Inheriting skills is a huge topic. I will eventually cover every inheritable skill, because unnecessary detail is the calling card of this series, but That will come in future videos. While you're training up in the arena, I'd check whether you have any units that hit a new SP benchmark and can inherit something new. You pay for a skill like Magic plus 5 in installments. There's no reason not to get Magic plus 3 if you can, and are planning to get the plus 5 eventually. If you see someone hit a round number, check if they can inherit something. Emblem training also gives weapon proficiencies, which you can use to change classes. It really is where most of the interesting roster decisions begin. As such, I think this is a great time to basically do a checkup on your army. Does anyone have any good stuff they picked up from enemies that you should give to someone else? Did anyone put something in the convoy you should take out? Do you have stat boosters you want to use or healing items to restock? Is now a good time to give someone SP books and accelerate their skill build? It's easy to let stuff collect dust in the convoy or forget to do a trade until you're in the middle of the map. If you build a habit of thinking through such things here in the routine, you're a lot less likely to forget some important bit of inventory management. Don't ask me how the Somniel floor plan includes this arena. Strength training isn't something I can bring myself to do every map, but it's worth keeping in mind. You get strength, HP, or dexterity on Alir by playing a minigame. In the early game, when Alir is dominating with Marth, the boosts can matter a lot. I normally stop doing this around now, as Alir switches to more of a support role. Your mileage may vary. Chucking stuff into this enticing well gives you random rewards based on the monetary value of what you discard. Each item in the pool has its own independent chance to drop, so you can get a lot or a little. Only the star rank matters, there's no partial credit. The rewards are determined the instant you tribute items, not when you collect them. To rig it, you have to play a map over and over again. That may disrupt the carefully crafted pacing of the game just a tad. I'd say maybe avoid it. The items you get are pretty cool. You will normally get enough stuff to keep the chain going without inordinate expense. Whatever you don't need, you can just discard again. You will consistently get books that increase SP by using the well, which is huge for the early game. If you're trying to train up a lot of units before Chapter 10 so you can give them good skills, these books make it much easier to guarantee those vital thresholds. Especially without the DLC, many units struggle to get early canter without a few. There's a whole set of joke weapons that are also edible healing items, which I get a kick out of. The heal staff knockoff, Treat, is actually kinda nice because it means you should never run out of healing. You can luck out into amazing weapons, staves, and items far earlier than you can get them normally. I'm not planning around anything in particular from the well, but if I get something good, I'm not going to stop myself from using it after Chapter 8. The exception is an early Master Seal. That changes the early game routing so much, it feels unfair to show any strategy that would depend on what is a 5% drop from the 3-star pool. If you get one of those, definitely use it. The 3-star pool, which requires 5000 G of items, guarantees a novice book. You can plan around that SP. It's generally a significant upgrade over the 2-star pool. Even if you have to buy things to discard, it's usually worth it. Once you get the investment going, you'll only be spending money from poor luck or great luck, not getting enough to reinvest, or getting something so good you want to keep it. The 4-star pool requires 10,000 G of items. That's a tall order right now, but the extra drops are worth it. You should definitely be shooting for 4 stars soon. With DLC, you can normally do this after the war chest from Brodia, and even without it, the war chest from Solm should do it. The 4-star pool has magic weapons, staves like Warp, and more. An early Flame Lance or extra seal can be worth 10,000 G on its own. The 5-star pool is 20,000 G and as spiffy as you would expect. It's hard for me to say this is strictly worth it, because normally you can just forge up whatever you'd be hoping for from the pool instead. You have a 1% chance for each stat booster, if you really want to go nuts grinding or something. You can adopt animals in the stable, and each chapter they'll give you a random item from a pool specific to the species. It has been well publicized that dogs are by far the best choice. Besides being good boys and girls, they give by far the most valuable drop, an iron, steel, or silver ore at random. They're your main source of silver ore, and nothing else you do here is even in the same ballpark. This is definitely worth your time if you want to use cool weapons, and who doesn't? After Chapter 8, you can pair up 2 units in each of 3 locations to do recreational activities and build support rank. This pool is one of them, so it's a convenient place to do that each map. Engage's supports build fairly quickly, and you shouldn't need to prioritize them too strictly. Support bonuses are minor boosts to hit, avoid, crit, and dodge. They don't affect anything that wasn't already RNG, so they're rarely essential. This is not the place you need to be optimizing with the calculator. A few esoteric dodge tank builds require supports to work, but those are advanced strategies. If you need to prioritize them, you shouldn't need me to tell you that. Otherwise, just vaguely go with units you use and or like. The shops update fairly frequently. Check the notifications each map if you don't know the timings. The item shop's important because the items are consumable. Knowing what this sells helps plan out what to use when. You shouldn't need to use a lot of healing items. If you do for some reason, no big deal, but it's rare you'll be using them across your whole army. You can buy many different staves here as you progress. I'll showcase them throughout the game, which should help you use and evaluate them. The warp, rewarp, and rescue staves are so good at trivializing maps, I'm intentionally not using them as much as I could. Don't interpret my stinginess as thinking they're bad. It's tempting to hoard limited resources like these. Maybe you'll need a freeze for some future map, right? Wrong. If you're half asleep right now, wake up, this is important. Don't give in to the temptation to hoard staves. Don't do it! They're tools the game gives you so you can use them, not so they can rot in your convoy. It's legitimately hard to think of good ways to exhaust your uses of most staves. I would know, I've tried and failed on my planning runs. The movement staves are useful for skipping tough maps late in the game, so I do think keeping a copy of Warp, Rewarp, and Rescue in your back pocket makes sense. For the status staves, go nuts. There is no way to use them that could possibly waste them more than having them in your convoy as you beat the game wastes them. I'll specifically highlight Obstruct. You get 5 Obstruct staves in the shop until Chapter 17, when the supply becomes infinite, on top of the one we got from the Chapter 5 chest. That's limited enough you can't just spam it for 100 turns a map to grind XP, but it's plenty for normal play. Obstruct is legitimately one of the coolest parts of Engage, and it kills me to imagine someone just hoarding all of them in their convoy. You can use Obstruct to manipulate enemy movement, save units after poor luck or planning by protecting them from a foe, deny terrain to the opponent, activate canter, and even maximize momentum. I probably use it more in my casual runs than I do here, because it's great for recovering from mistakes or letting someone canter somewhere after you position them incorrectly. I tried so many things in Chapter 6 to get the clear I wanted, and everything fell into place the instant I realized I could use Obstruct to make it work. Keep them in your staff user's equipment slots, so you don't forget they exist and you always have the option to use it. Tonics, also sold here, give great value. After Chapter 8, we'll be able to buy as many as we want, and they're a great way to hit stat thresholds. A turn 50G is enough that you can't just put them on everyone all the time, but it's more than cheap enough to be worth liberal spending on them. I like buying a few of each at a time to reduce the number of shopping trips, but especially without DLC, buying as needed makes sense. I'll intentionally underutilize these. I want these series to showcase broad tactical and strategic ideas that can beat maps even if you get unlucky growths or use a suboptimal unit you think is cute. If a strategy needs a tonic, that means it probably also needs the specific unit I'm using, and it needs a certain set of growths. I'm not going to play the game with one hand tied behind my back. There will definitely be maps I use tonics for, but I'll try to find alternatives. Lastly, we get class-changing seals here soon. These are a vital part of Engage's metagame, and unlike staves, you will desperately want more. Don't waste them until you get infinite seals after Chapter 17. You get 3 Master Seals and 3 Second Seals before Chapter 10. The Second Seals aren't always in high demand, but everyone wants to promote. We'll discuss how to think about allocating them once we need to choose, but in terms of Somniel routing, I would plan to buy every seal until Chapter 17. After Chapter 8, you have 3 Second Seals and 1 Master Seal from this shop. 10,000 of the 30,000 G you get after that map should be earmarked for those. As the game progresses, newcomers will arrive packing decent weapons, and many things you can buy here will show up for free if you wait. That being said, don't be stingy here. Compared to inheriting skills or stat boosters, good weapons are usually economical. The weapons that manipulate range, hand axes, javelins, mini-bows, longbows, and thunder, are worth having on anyone who can wield them. I have pages of notes on these maps, and I've still had an unplanned mini-bow use that made Chapter 5 easier. In normal play, realizing you're just out of range is very common, and a longbow is a lot better than nothing. Once you have enough 11 swords to go around, they're also worth having on every pure sword wielder, even if their magic is pitiful. There's all kinds of situations that having just that little bit of extra range can be vital, even if it's just to activate Canter. Another thing to remember is that anyone you V-classed might need new weaponry here. Trust me, it's a bad feeling when you start a map and then realize your shiny new Mage Knight has no tomes. Even if they don't get any new weapon types, they may be able to use a high rank weapon they couldn't previously. You can go to the orchard and pick up some food items, and strewn throughout the Somniel you'll find other stuff. Don't bother unless you enjoy that running around. You might say, hey, you're using a quality of life mod that lets you pick them all up with a button press. How would you know whether skipping them will be a problem? Trust me, before I started playing with mods in preparation for this run, I suffered no consequences from shunning the orchard and missing pebbles on the ground in many a campaign. If you donate and run around after battles, you'll pick up enough for plenty of meals. Supports accrue quickly in Engage and aren't that important. You don't need gifts. You'll be fine.
Welcome.
The boutique has no gameplay implications, it's purely cosmetic. Engage's economy is not so tight you'll normally regret giving your unit some drip, but maybe make sure you're getting early Canter and Forges first.
Be well.
If you're interested in optimizing the little things, now is a good time to figure out what your plan is for the next map. Cooking and the Smithy are both places you can squeeze out a few stat points if there's some benchmark you're missing by a hair. If you're playing casually, there's rarely much to gain from this, and unlike some previous titles, Engage has a lot of variety in enemies. It's rare there are 20 ninjas with the same speed next map that you really want to double. As our team gets stronger, we'll have better things to do than pray that Boucheron gets an exact kill with a hand axe at 81 hit. It'll also be much harder to work things out in the preps menu. Reinforcements and longer maps reduce how much you can plan without doing full restarts, like I will for this series. Still, if it would gnaw at you to miss some doubling thresholds you could have routed in, save and go figure out what you need to do now. What should we be doing at the Smithy? First off, props to Intelligent Systems for what I consider the best design of how weapons and the Smithy works in a Fire Emblem game to date. Weapons never break, so my inner hoarder can relax, but you still get the fun of limited use super weapons through emblems. You have interesting decisions to make in how you forge and engrave weapons that can materially affect your campaign without breaking the balance. There's very little RNG in the resource system that powers the Smithy, and you generally don't need to change your plans because of your ore luck. Generally speaking, weapons have been differentiated and balanced in such a way that every weapon has a purpose. In a game without many ways to differentiate units, weapon ranks do that, and because you don't earn them through combat, you're never tempted to grind repetitively just to use a cool sword. Every engrave has a home on something, and they're generally quite cheap relative to other ways of improving weapons. They're also easy to reassign with only a small bond fragment cost. When you get a new emblem, think through what weapons might be good with it and try one out. You can see what I do with them, but the general principles are simple. Small boosts to hit, crit, and avoid are best for workhorse weapons that roll those dice often, like Fencelir or Hand Axe. Might is best on weapons that you use in engage attacks, and effective weaponry like bows that can get triple value out of each extra point. Hit is best on inaccurate weapons. Crit is best on killer weapons, because small crit chances can be actively bad, but 100 crit is amazing. Weight is negated by build, so either target the engraving for a unit with low build, or put it on a heavy weapon like the Levin Sword that nearly everyone will be weighed down by. Avoid is best when you have a lot of it, much like crit. It's best for dodge tanks. Dodge is normally useless, but it's nice to have one or two high dodge weapons for dealing with enemy killer weapons or for units with poor luck. Some engraves have penalties you can neutralize with some thought. Thunder can't double and rarely sees a counterattack, so weight penalties barely matter. Surge always hits, so hit penalties don't matter. Etia using a steel bow will normally die to any counterattack, so avoid or dodge penalties also barely matter. Refining weapons uses golden ores to enhance or transform your weapons. Each weapon type has a different set of bonuses at each refinement level, unlike engraves, so there's a lot of texture here, and I won't exhaustively cover everything. I'll link to a Reddit post by Shen Has Failed that's pretty comprehensive, and Triangle Attack lists every weapon set at every level. Here I'll limit myself to general advice. First, forging is fantastic return on investment. Yunaka's Iron Dagger costs 300G and 10 iron ore to forge to +1, which adds 2 might. How could I get Yunaka 2 damage in other ways? Inheriting Strength +2 costs 1000 SP. Going from strength 2 to strength plus 4 costs 4000 SP and can't even be done for a long time. Energy drops have a 1% drop rate from the 20,000 G Ancient Whale Pool. Tonics cost 150 G every map, so if you're using a strength tonic to replace the forge, you're in the red after just 2 maps. I've cherry-picked an example, but hopefully you see my point. Plus 1s are generally fantastic value. If you use a weapon, getting it plus 1 is rarely a bad call. The fire tomes and standard daggers are workhorse weapons you will use constantly. 1-2 range, low weight, and no drawbacks. It's worth forging up a couple really good weapons in those families throughout the game, even if that's more expensive than forging up a lot of plus 2 weapons you only use a little. Effective weapons get increased value from forged might, but they're situational. My advice is to wait until you need them for a specific benchmark and then forge, rather than forging an armor slayer you may never use. You'll almost certainly want a few especially effective weapons. A steel bow plus 3 can be your best friend when dealing with waves of enemy flyers. Powerful weapons that you use for engage attacks are sometimes worth forging extra, because there's often no way to compensate if they're just shy of a benchmark. If your Sigurd user goes 10 tiles and uses override, they can't rely on anyone else being able to accompany them to do chip damage, apply spur attack, or the like. Forging can also be used to get weapons earlier than you could obtain them otherwise. You can't see the new weapon name before forging it, which I think is the hint that I'd generally avoid that if you're new to the game. For veterans who know when weapons become available, you can open up a lot of options. We've already demonstrated this by getting an 11 sword far earlier than normal. Exchanging ore is most useful for converting silvers from your stable into more steels or irons. There's no need to do this unless you have a specific benchmark in mind, but you should know the conversion rates. Each level is considered 10 times as valuable as the last, but there's a 10% conversion fee both ways. You only get 9 steels from a silver, and you need 11 steels to make a silver.
I'll be here.
You don't need to forge something every map. It's okay to just float some ore and wait until you see something meaningful to do with it. If you realize you have a hoarding problem, get your plus 1s if you don't know what else to do.
Aye.
Cooking gives your entire team boosted stats until the next map. There's a random component. Depending on the quality of the chef and your own fortune, the stats you get will vary, and sometimes specific units will get extra boosts. There are also disaster piecemeals that don't give the advertised stats or even give penalties. S ranks are common in games, but I admire the gall of any game with G ranks. Extra ingredients boost the chance of character-specific meals at the cost of D through G rank meals. That's normally a good thing, even if there are a few character-specific bad meals. The different proficiencies, marked by a sparkle icon, also change our odds. Expert and skilled act the same way as extra ingredients. Eager increases the likelihood of a failure as well as a character-specific meal, and capable decreases failure likelihood by a small amount. Adding rare ingredients, counterintuitively, doesn't affect the meal itself. Instead, it increases the support points the diners gain with each other. The most important thing is getting a meal with a good rank that boosts the stats you want. Support points can be managed in other ways. I prioritize speed and then strength and/or magic after that. If you can find a meal that boosts those stats with an expert or skilled rating, maybe with a few extra ingredients, that's normally a good idea.
No, do
Early
not
on,
expect
meals
too
matter a
much
lot
of
more
me.
proportionally, which can be
This dish
frustrating.
is for the
My
divine
best
dragon.
advice for enjoying Engage is
Failure
trying to
would
get to
be
the point where your success on a
inexcusable.
map will not come down to a point of speed or strength.
I believe this will please.
A meal of rank C or above gives a packed meal. This is irrelevant unless you use favorite
Please,
food, in which case it's completely irreplaceable. Luckily, you can rig meals in a couple ways. Resting in a Lear's room changes the cook without changing the meal grade. A character's first specific meal maps to a different character's first specific meal. To change that part of the luck, you can fight an arena battle or load the preps venue of a map. Both of those advance the sequence of random numbers. Different players have different philosophies about whether cooking should be manipulated. I'll do what I would recommend. Don't laboriously rig great meals, but do re-roll catastrophic failures. Especially given how much I'm planning for maps, I won't abide -2 speed and no meal boost across my whole army because Alfred's fed me a science experiment gone wrong. I also think playing with your emblems is fun, and favorite food is a great way to do that. I tend to reroll anything D or below for that reason. If you don't consider that ethical gameplay, I can see where you're coming from. In that case, I'd recommend saving a skirmish map or two. If you realize you're on Kitchen Nightmares right before a brutal map, skirmishes let you refresh the Somniel and try again. Conversely, if you want to rig great meals, have at it. Tonics are a lot easier to use if you need stat bonuses, although of course for some benchmarks, you may need to stack tonics on top of a rigged meal. You can also apply tonics in the battle prep menu, so it's easier to adjust on the fly. If you want to hit a benchmark I'm reaching, and you are unlucky with growths, tonics should be your first recourse and a rigged meal your second. If you are going to rig, it may make sense to save the arena stuff until after you cook. Arena battles are a lot faster than loading the preps menu of the next chapter. So, to conclude, here's what I would do between chapters if you're interested in keeping your gameplay options open without spending more time running around here than you do actually playing maps. First, view any available support or bond rank conversations, except maybe level 10 Leaf. Then, get achievements and any donations you planned. Check through your units. Are any of them in a situation where arena training would get them to a new threshold for XP, SP, or bond ranks? If so, top them up. Otherwise, just feed someone 30 XP. Is anyone at a new SP benchmark for inheriting something? Does anyone want to change classes or use SP books? Is there a new emblem pairing you want to kickstart by training up that bond rank? Are there any stat boosters you want to give or new weapons you want to assign? Are there any staves or healing items you need to replenish? Are there any new recruits you want to outfit? Go to the Ancient Well, get your drops, and put in enough for a 3-star rank at least. Make that 4 stars if you can afford it. If you need to buy weapons to do that, make a note and come back. Then consider strength training. Go to the stable and pick up your items. Do remember to put dogs out in the field if you get them. They won't earn ore until you do that. Play matchmaker and give units some recreation time. If you have new items or weapons at the shop, consider buying them. If you have the DLC and it's money, you can normally afford to buy everything in advance so you don't forget, but if you're tight on money, you may need to buy only as needed. Do be careful doing that. It's easy to forget you can use Obstruct or Physic if you don't have it on the staff user already. If you want to see what the next map is throwing at you, save now and go figure that out. Even if not, save before you cook unless you're committing to playing with whatever meals you get. Cook a meal that gives useful stats, optionally re-rolling for a better one. If you got a new emblem, engrave a weapon at the Smithy. Beyond that, check if you can forge up +1s on weapons you're using or progress any particular plans you have here. With repetition, this routine can be quite quick. It also has a decent ratio of random chores to actual gameplay decisions. The Somniel is certainly not Gary Mock, which I'm thankful for. To be clear, you may have the most fun doing more or less than I do. What I'm showing here isn't optimal in any objective sense. You can beat the game without ever using the Somniel, so you can certainly enjoy Engage without standard arena training or cooking every map. Do Sommie and Alir look like they're going to be mad if you aren't grinding out bond fragment pickups?